Okay, hey, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really special review for you guys from the brand Hemel. A little about them. They are proudly Long Island's first microbrand. They're based out of Nassau County between Suffolk and Queens counties, and they're about a stone's throw away from Manhattan. And in terms of the sub brand underneath Hemel, this is Eylandt by Hemel, and it is a collection of sturdy, purpose-built watches featuring Sapphire, as well as at least 100 meters of water resistance. Now, in terms of type of watch, I consider this an everyday adventure watch. So although it does have a lot of elements from dive watches, whether it be that rotating bezel or field watches or flight watches, I like that it all kind of comes together in just a versatile everyday package. Some key common characteristics, and I when you're looking for something within this genre, of course, you're going to find something that is sporty, legible, and tough. So this Eylandt by Hemel is the Avenger model, and it's essentially a timeless wristwatch with a lugless puck type of design, and it's pretty much instantly fits a variety of wrists, making it a versatile unisex accessory. Yes, this is something that you could wear, the girlfriend, your kids. This is very versatile thanks to that lugless puck style design. Also, you do have in this particular setup here in the Avenger colorway or design aesthetic, you're going to get that high contrast dial as well as the second time zone bezel insert to offer you, a kind of a modern take on utility with a strong emphasis on user-friendly and efficient interaction. These are very affordable at just $199.99, so just under $200 direct. This sample was kindly provided by Marvin at Hemel for the purpose of this video review, but of course all of the thoughts are my own. They don't get, no brand has any type of authority or any type of editorial input. They don't even get to see the videos early. They'll see this when you guys see this. So we're gonna kick off the year right with a micro brand highlighting, just some of these lesser known brands for you guys to really take a look at. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, starting the new year off with a bang. This fun little piece here from Hemel, the Eylandt by Hemel, and the Avenger design way here. Now, in terms of the dimensions, this is 40 millimeters in diameter, and typically these puck style designs, they can make a 45 millimeter watch, 47, 48 millimeter watch seem very wearable. So this in a 40 is going to be extremely wearable, almost to the point to where it feels quite dressy at times. And I think with that particular monochromatic design aesthetic, very stark and high contrast, of course you do get that pop of color there with the orange seconds hand, which I do appreciate. This does keep it quite classy, which I like. I even do like the high contrast stitching there on this genuine leather strap. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 40 millimeters across, of course, which means 40 millimeters lug to lug, because you can see here it is a puck style design. Also, in terms of thickness, only 10.9 millimeters thick, so quite nice. You can see quite thin, nice coin edge grip there on that bezel. 316L stainless steel, brushed case with some nice high polished beveling there that goes all the way around, which is very unique and something that's fun to see. And if you're somebody that appreciates case architecture, the playing of different dimensions with different proportions, there's a lot to enjoy with this piece. Even that very cool crown, which is not a screw down, it's a push-pull crown, but it does have that really nice inlay. So I think that looks quite good. Check that out. And of course, the knurling there does match the coin edge grip there on the bezel, as well as there on the crown, which is nicely positioned at 4 o'clock to keep everything out of the way. Now, you are going to have a flat sapphire crystal with an inner anti-reflective coating, which is going to be great for negotiating various lighting conditions. Now, the bezel itself, 120 clicks. The grip is good, but I will say, because it doesn't extend past the case, it's actually inset a bit. you're going to want to try to hit it from a certain angle where your fingers are a little bit slightly on top. It gets going. There is a bit of play you can see here, but it does rest on the stops very nice and solid. So even though you can rock it a bit, the resting point on there is quite secure. And let me give it a quick little wipe here, and then give you guys a nice look at that bezel insert, which is going to be an aluminum insert with the coating there. In terms of the movement, although you can't see it, you do have this very cool kind of coin style case back, which looks quite good. And inside, you're going to have a Quartz Seiko Instruments VH31, which is going to have a 2-year power reserve in terms of the battery life, and then it's going to be beating at 2 hertz or 14,400 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. So typical standard beat rate would be 3 hertz, which would be 6 ticks per second. And up from that would be, more of the standard on the Swiss side, which is going to be 4 hertz, which is going to be 8 ticks per second. And then once you start getting into high beat, that's when it's 10 ticks per second and 5 hertz. So this is going to be slower than that, but still a nice smooth sweep. Of course, since this is being run by a battery and not mechanically, there are some good things, like you're going to have an accuracy of plus or minus 10 seconds per month, which is very accurate. That's like less than half a second a day. But in terms of the battery life, that is going to be a bit of a drain. So only 2 years there in terms of that power reserve. Now, the dial is a nice matte black there, a nice high contrast. There's a lot of information, but I think it's really well spaced there. Of course, you're going to have a no date complication. So it's going to be a very clean, balanced, and symmetrical layout. Also, like I mentioned before in the intro, you're going to have, instead of a 60-minute counter, you're going to have the 12-hour offset there. So you can actually use this as a secondary time zone, which is going to work really well and be quite useful, to be honest. And of course, you can always use it as timing increments, because you just got to multiply each point by 5. Now, the strap, it pairs into these nice, again, lugless case, almost a hooded type of lug there. Where you're going to have 20 millimeters. So it's going to be quite versatile, but of course with that undercut, there's not necessarily going to be a lot of room. You can see even out of the factory, they have curved, I would say probably they're using a curved spring bar, definitely a curved end strap there just to fit and have it butt up nicely. But this black leather strap is very nice with that contrast stitching, and it does taper down nicely by 2 millimeters to 18 millimeters on the tang buckle side, where you do have that fully brushed tang buckle that is also nicely signed. So with all that said, let's go ahead, get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference, I think it wears really well. Maybe a bit on the small side in terms of having full context of the human body, but as a floating wrist, I think it suits me quite well. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, it's probably going to look like it fits even better, because it's going to make the watch a lot larger, at least visually, because you're going to have a fair amount of perspective distortion. You're going to notice the sides of the strap and the sides of my wrist in general are going to fall off as I get closer, and all of a sudden it's going to be much larger. It's again that kind of more 3D pop effect, versus if I keep my wrist nice and low and I leave it here, you can see all of a sudden you're seeing a lot more strap. You're seeing a lot more of the flatness of the wrist versus the roundness. So I'll just keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a true aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And now you'll notice, for some of you might be thinking this looks a bit too small. Let me know down in the comments. For me, yeah, I think it does. I think that could have been avoided if they would have maybe done a 22 or even a 24 millimeter lug there, and it would have gave it more of an integrated look. But I understand from a unisex perspective why you would want to have that 20 millimeter width, because something wider than that wouldn't be the best for somebody with a smaller wrist. I think it would have been cool to maybe have a stepped out, like a flared option, to kind of have the best of both worlds, where you could still have a 20 millimeter lug, but then maybe have a bit of a flare to where they could butt up against the case and just make it seem like it flows a little bit more. Versus right now, again, that's the puck style. It's kind of the whole point. But when you do this puck style and you have it with a bezel, a turning bezel that shrinks the dial down, and it ultimately, in terms of proportions, can make it seem, well, I love the thinness though. Look at that. I mean, it's no thicker than a couple of silver dollars. Honestly, in terms of the size, it's very reminiscent of a stack of silver dollars, which I think is really cool. So this is a fun one. I like that even though its proportions can be more on the extreme side and quite dynamic, the design aesthetic is still super versatile, super readable, legible, and well balanced, and honestly quite timeless. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right. Pretty decent Lume, guys. Again, everyday adventure type piece. This isn't a dedicated diver, doesn't have a screw down crown, but I will say it does have the chops to be worn during water sports. You might want to swap out, of course, that leather strap, but I think it does the job. But one thing I like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice with these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see really nice contrast, again, whether it's going to be from the luminescence or from just the black on white there. So you're going to have a lot of legibility, although there is a lot of information there, even when you add to it that 12-hour traveler's bezel. But I think this is a good looking watch. The proportions are a little bit small for me, but the nice thing is, it might be a little bit small for me, but somebody else in my family with a smaller wrist, which typically that's how it goes, whether it's one of my sons, my daughter, something like that, they could easily wear something like this. Significant others, of course, are going to fall within that category as well. So very cool. Something that's different, right, in terms of the silhouette, but in terms of the design aesthetic, still quite familiar. So I do like that. But with that said, we'll go ahead, get the lights back on here, and get into some closing thoughts on the wrist. Very compact wear, maybe a touch too small for my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference wrist. It's honestly a great example of how you can't really just go off of specs alone, and really should always consider design proportions. I know some people are going to go, oh, it's the lug to lug. It's not just the lug to lug, because if they had done this in an all dial type of situation, I think it would look much better on my wrist, and it could still be 40 millimeters, because again, it's the design as well, and of course the proportions, the dial to bezel ratio. So it's not just as simple as people swear, oh, I can't have anything under 40 millimeters or over 40 millimeters, all these weird things, or hey, well, if the lug to lug is over this or that. There's other nuances. It's not as cut and dry. There are watches you think would not wear well that do, and there are watches that you would want to scale down that don't scale down well. And sometimes that 42 millimeter watch, and you don't like larger watches, a 42 millimeter watch that wears like a 40, it might be what you're looking for. And it's not just because of whatever's on the spec sheet. It's about how it is on your wrist in terms of its general wearability. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability. I will say there are tons of variations, and they are very, very diverse, which is very cool about this line, is that there are quite a few options. Definitely check the links down in the description to kind of see some of those other variations that are going to be a little bit more dedicated to other genres. Now, in terms of comparable models, I have seen more and more of these sweeping quartz three-handers, but not quite enough to really have any standout contemporaries just come to mind when I think about that. So let me know down in the comments, are there any models that you think are really good direct competitors to this model? So for me, guys, bottom line, this is just a fun $200 small wristwatch with a versatile design and better finishing than you'll find typically at this price point from an actual micro brand versus the generic factory homage brands, which there's nothing wrong with them, but they do just kind of flood the market at this price point. It's a lot of derivative things. I think this comes together, gives you something a little bit more fun, a little bit more special. Even if you're giving this as a gift, you're giving something to somebody that just has a little bit more thought and kind of more of a deliberate execution to it when you do go over those fine details. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.